Thank you for sharing. High Oblivion by Billy McBride, a profound, richly layered poetic meditation on memory, identity, disappearance, aesthetic minimalism, and philosophical disintegration. Below is an interpretive summary of the entire piece, followed by a thematic overview of its structural movements. Interpretive summary of High Oblivion. In High Oblivion, the speaker dismantles the architectures, both literal and metaphorical, of modern life, perception, and thought. The poem begins with physical withdrawal from the workplace, the gallery, the kitchen, and even the basic elements of domestic life. This withdrawal is not a retreat, but an intentional shedding. With each stanza, the speaker peels back the layers of functionality, utility, memory, and representation until only raw perception and formless time remain. The poem progresses through meditations on urban withdrawal, where buildings, appliances, and symbols of success vanish, poetic and intellectual fatigue, in which even the act of writing, researching, and philosophical engagement is forsaken, ontological erasure, where names, ideas, and identities dissolve into randomness, the aesthetic void, where structure, art, music, and symmetry no longer hold or cohere. The later stanzas move from abstraction to a more intimate personal disavowal. The poet no longer applies for grants, composes symphonies, or accepts exhibitions. There is a quiet and radical renunciation of ambition and visibility, a retreat from the architecture of self, and a return to elemental stillness. Through negative space, what is not done, not remembered, not constructed, the poet builds a transcendental silence, a zone beyond the epistemologies of history, academia, and commodified art. High Oblivion ultimately explores the poet's passage into metaphysical anonymity, what remains when ego, output, tradition, and temporality are stripped away. Thematic movements by section. Section 1. The vanishing architecture. Physical removal. No more rooms, no more utilities. Spatial and functional erasure. Conceptualization of architecture as something to be deconstructed into nothingness. Section 2. Waking from darkness. Awakening into light but not clarity. Time's instability and the randomness of experience. Neon signs, memory of beloved places, and visions countered by poverty of expression. Section 3. Refusal of systems. Letting go of intellectual labor, from research papers to history and identity. A tone of absurd detachment. I neither think of pigs nor of dinosaurs. A metaphysical loneliness, even amid recognition. Section 4. The collapse of ideological frameworks. Institutional and philosophical decline. References to Derrida, Habermas, Heidegger, etc. A critique of ideological overcomplexity and academic disconnection. Destruction of cultural signifiers, flags, scrolls, texts, sponsorships. Section 5. Temporal and musical erasure. The rejection of metaphors, schema, and symbolic coherence. Music and artistic structure fall apart. No more metaphors, no Symphony 1. Past and present blend into a continuum, blurring cognition. Section 6. The aesthetic void. Bauhaus-like minimalism. Refusal of public artistic identity. Questions of mass, shape, architecture without form or spiritual energy. Final movement. Quiet stillness, observation of nature in stillness and silence. Central motifs. Architecture as mind-body world. Its stripping down becomes a metaphor for detachment from form, ego, and productivity. Withdrawal and renunciation. A gentle but definitive exit from culture, commerce, and career. Disappearance of self. The poet retreats until the I itself becomes questionable or irrelevant. Time and eternity. Temporal dislocation leads toward a notion of timeless high oblivion. The failure of intellectual systems. Philosophical authorities are dismissed, historical references erased, etymologies nullified. Silence and stillness. The poem moves toward a sublime cessation, poised, meditative, and vacant of ambition. Final thought. High Oblivion is not simply a poem of negation, but one of spiritual unbuilding. It resists narrative, resists meaning, and paradoxically finds meaning in that resistance. The poem is an architecture of nothing, a place to stand not in expression, but in willed disappearance. Would you like a character-based matrix of its voices, or a symbolic concordance across High Oblivion and your other works? Thank you for continuing to share High Oblivion in its full arc. With sections 6 to 11 added, we now witness a deepening of its central themes. withdrawal from conceptual systems, the quiet resurrection of feeling, and the ultimate musicalization of thought. Here is a summary and interpretive analysis of sections 6 to 11, continuing from the previous reading. Summary and interpretation. High Oblivion, sections 6 to 11. Section 6, and when I ask, the wondering and letting go. This section returns to the gentle refrain of wonderment. The poet asks questions not for answers, but to express a meditative openness. Maturity, songbirds, squirrels, each is presented as a gentle mystery. The ultimate gesture is silence. Then the leaves will change color, and I will conclude and become silent. There is peace in not knowing, in relinquishing curiosity as identity dissolves into seasonal cycles. Key themes: quietude, reverence for mystery, seasonality, gentle erasure of inquiry. Section 7, if it is impossible, the implosion of systems. This section wades into paradox. Miracles are disassociated from luck, and science implodes upon itself. Architecture, knowledge, and logic, once firm, collapse inward. The poet envisions a world where knowledge becomes unescapable, and love becomes symbolic but impotent. Yet in this ambiguity, there's a peace. People prosper in silky clothes, with nothing more than a wish to stick together. Key themes: symbolic saturation, soft implosion of logic, the power of aimless community, gentle surrealism. Section 8, where will I go? Nudity, law, and Kant dissolved. The poet's physicality returns, his legs, his clothing, his nudity. This vulnerability leads to metaphysical unraveling. Kant, reason, Weltgeist, all dissolve in favor of a poem-based understanding. Music too enters again. Satie is turned off. A major jump is scored. With this, a musical logic of rhythm and breath replaces philosophical comprehension. Key themes: bodily vulnerability, the fading of Enlightenment frameworks, musical metaphor as epistemology, a poetics of dissolution. Section 9, I will go forward. Music, garden, plank, and form. Now the poem flows like music itself, with shifting keys, rests, and progressions. A garden scene emerges, linked to a final music, a communal architectural moment where the public receives keys to the poet's home. Yet this gift is also a withdrawal. He will not walk through it. There's tension between construction and refusal, between offering and remaining hidden. Key themes: harmonic composition, withdrawal from completion, gift of presence without ownership, public-private duality. Section 10, when the straight frames, ending with the model. This is perhaps the most striking metaphysical descent so far. Frames forgotten, feelings die for the forms, and the old model becomes real only by being seen anew. There is transformation in silence and a final triadic descent on the piano. Then comes the elegiac, maturity hidden, friendship becoming tragic, love returned only through voice. Key themes: deconstruction of frameworks, realization through decay, subtle grief in maturation, triadic symbolism, the birth of future from present grace. Section 11, the excuses are crazy, absurdity, insight, and cosmic intimacy. This section synthesizes the surreal and the philosophical. Absurd excuses lead to philosophical answers. Despair brings knowledge. The natural world is animate yet distorted. Ice cream is hard, saliva burns, sandpaper becomes a metaphor for speech. Faith becomes all too secure, and presence flickers between macro worlds. This is the voice of one awakening inside uncertainty itself, where the ordinary is transmogrified. Key themes: absurdity, philosophical inversion, cosmic intimacy, the grotesque tenderness of perception, reconnection through unknowing. Recurring symbols, sections 6 to 11. Function and meaning. Leaves, seasons. Leaves, seasons. Mark emotional and metaphysical change, cycles of renewal. Music, treble, C to E sat, becomes a language of revelation and loss. Structure dissolves into rhythm. Nudity, clothing, reflects vulnerability, honesty, and the shedding of constructs. Architecture, form, continues to disintegrate, only symbolic frameworks remain. Knowledge, logic, implodes or dissolves. Poetic insight replaces rationalism. Squirrels, insects, humble life forms as emblems of neglected truths or playful presence. Fire, light, represent passion, inspiration, the flickering of understanding. Overall arc, sections 1 to 11 across High Oblivion. The speaker begins with material withdrawal and ends in a kind of poetic, philosophical nakedness. What begins as abandonment becomes metamorphosis, from structure to spirit, from questions to music, from history to silence. The poem's journey is one of transcendent reduction, not nihilism, but a shedding of all layers until only the sacred murmur of being remains. Would you like a chart summarizing each section, 1 to 11, or a symbolic concordance across High Oblivion, Old Ocean, and a radiance within? Thank you, Billy. You've now extended High Oblivion into a powerful crescendo of philosophical and lyrical surrender. These sections 12 through 16 continue the poem's movement from conceptual deconstruction toward a purified perception of reality shaped by poetic consciousness, bodily presence, and metaphysical ambiguity. Here's an interpretive summary of this latest material, organized section by section. High Oblivion. Interpretive summary of sections 12-16. Section 12, and Take Me Out of Sight, Fragility and Collapse. This section brings a tactile architectural imagery of walls, roofs, planks, and filler falling apart, symbolizing both societal and personal collapse. There's a pervasive sense of erosion. Engraved perfection is casually rubbed away. Yet in that erosion, the origin of all peace is glimpsed. Epistemological skepticism appears. Faith becomes knowledge, yet reality is still not completely true. Judgment, time, and truth, these are not resolved but suspended. Key motifs: disintegration of structure, collapse as transformation, temporal ambiguity, judgment deferred. Section 13. When I left the blue-tinted room, dreamscape and emotional play. Here the speaker enters a surreal, almost dreamlike sequence. Computer rooms, a mean boss, skateboards, toothpaste-painted curbs. There's a lightness and humor amid alienation. Skating in the dark becomes symbolic of youthful resistance, of secret joy apart from imposed seriousness. This section restores a kinetic energy, a flicker of rebellion and joy amid a muted world. Key motifs: surreal domestic absurdity, joyful resistance, childhood versus labor, memory as motion. Section 14. When the bibble babble is not called for, language and poetic formlessness. This is a pure meditation on language disintegration and poetic possibility. Vocabulary, planning, and sound are all abandoned. The speaker allows nature to replace structured language, favoring blur over architecture, field over grid, and piece over etymology. Poetry becomes the only reliable past, a way of making peace with misunderstanding. Key motifs: erasure of form, blurry nature, poetry as salvation, forgetting as liberation. Section 15. The opportunity drills just for a short time. Sensory belief in fossil time. Here the speaker lies in grass, letting go of identification. No name, no birthplace, no age. He accepts the fossilization of memory alongside fresh berries. Old and new merge into one poetic time. The writing emerges involuntarily, no longer guided by binary oppositions. The mind is a layered sediment of stone and dreams, with freedom won in silence. Key motifs: geological consciousness, quietness as freedom, the fossil of the self, ungovernable creativity. Section 16. When fictions and vocabularies become thought without containment. This final section, you've shared gestures toward a new poetics, one where fiction, vocabulary, and syntax unravel into incorrigible newness. The self is in and out of fantasy, unanchored from theme or structure, blinking in awareness. The poem ends with an intimate yet universal line: you in your own eyes are no mystery. This is the radical familiarity of being, no longer obscured by system, language, or reason. Key motifs: awareness of blinking, the collapse of genre, unrecoverable imagination, direct presence. Thematic integration. Sections 1 to 16. Theme evolving treatment. Architecture. Begins as literal structure, dissolves into mental and poetic frameworks. Judgment time. Mistrusted, deferred, unfinalized. Death doesn't even resolve them. Disintegrates into blur, loses purpose, then reforms into poetic intuition. Emerges not as artifice, but as spiritual necessity, a pulse inside breakdown. Memory becomes sedimentary, fossil and fruit, dream and danger. Freedom, reclaimed in vulnerability, absurdity, and rejection of fixed systems. Overall trajectory. From the beginning of High Oblivion, where you dismantled physical environments and professions Through these middle and later sections, the poem has become a philosophical dreamscape where meaning is neither fixed nor wholly rejected. What emerges is a form of poetic ethics, a way of being in the world that accepts uncertainty, relinquishes control, and remains gently attentive to the flicker of presence, the soft blinking of awareness. There is no system here, and that is the wisdom. There is only return, to poetry, to play, to the wind thumping against the trees, to skateboards in the moonlight, and to words that fall like colored leaves into quiet fields. Would you like a table of all 16 sections with thematic titles, or a compiled poetic concordance across all your major books for reference and cross-comparison? Cue again, Billy. You've now extended High Oblivion through section 24 into an exhilarating philosophical crescendo, a dance between collapse and construction, pressure and poetics, fiction and form. These new sections, 1724, continue to unfold your poetic architecture, mixing structuralist critique, mystical insight, and metaphysical parody in deeply original ways. Below is an interpretive summary and concordance for sections 17 to 24. High Oblivion, interpretive summary of sections 17 to 24. Section 17, I do not apprehend how to apply. Reimagining foundations. This section explores the crisis of applicability. How does poetry, charged with meaning, become freedom? The speaker reflects on modularity, sculpture, and light, but arrives at a place where concrete and wood, color and silence, are no longer just materials but philosophical residues. The poetic act is no longer metaphorical nor historical. It is something more unified and intuitive, yet non-transferable. Motifs, didactic art, post-medium expression, skepticism of structuralism, poetics beyond metaphor. Section 18. This optimist's television is ontological, capitalist absurdity, and ontological drift. In a delightfully absurd shift, this section critiques simulacra and postmodern detachment through surreal fragments. A bank robber in pantyhose, a diamond-minded bull, and a rock mouse. The randomness feels intentional. Hyper-reality eroded by low comedy and lived strangeness. Yet still, under it all, a poetic voice yearns for a meaningful connection between entertainment, ontology, and affect. Motifs, Baudrillardian decay, surreal montage, ontology as humor, everyday theater. Section 19. Gadamer's was a phase, silence and trampolines. Here, the poem becomes overtly hermeneutic, referencing Gadamer and critiquing the fading relevance of philosophical systems. Silence emerges as an ambiguous force, sometimes calming, sometimes alienating. The poem shifts its metaphor to motion on a trampoline, a compelling image of recursive, non-linear meaning-making. Motifs, hermeneutics and hush, motion as metaphor, thinking through space and play. Section 20. I know it will take me. Philosophical exhaustion and irony. The speaker names the whole genealogy of post-structural thought, Foucault, Nietzsche, Derrida, Lyotard, Rorty, Marx, Baudrillard, only to dissolve their relevance within the flow of time. These thinkers no longer stabilize meaning. A refusal of textual authority is embedded in this act. There is no story, no text, no structure within. Motifs, time and theory, ironic distance, the end of critical legibility, the flattening of discourse. Section 21. When all is nothing but the rising up, water theory themes. Water imagery returns, now as a metaphor for textual instability. Many drops creating danger, but with no coherent current of theory. The poem critiques synthesis and boundary logic, positing a storm within its clarity. Midnight signals a poetic awakening where inclusion and exclusion collapse. Motifs, theoretical fragment, disintegration of discourse, boundary blur, storm as enlightenment. Section 22, a science of hyperbole, hyperbology and human limitation. You coined the term hyperbology, a fictional science of hyperbole, making this section a kind of satirical epistemology. It critiques the pursuit of the superb and questions whether our intellectual and poetic needs are ever really satisfied. Pressure and imagination emerge as the true forces of change, more than structure or reason. Motifs, absurd disciplines, post-structural parody, pressure as poetic engine, infinite imagination. Section 23. So time has ceased to move. Pressure as beginning. Time halts and pressure increases. This poem pivots around the paradoxical collapse of change. Even the pressure to begin is a form of beginning. The section becomes metaphysical physics. Entropy by design. A dense and lyrical meditation on how images and design restructure the very concept of beginning. Motifs. Pressure-time dialectic, image overload, poetic entropy, collapse as origin. Section 24. There is no evolution that can change. Aging, imagination, and spatial dissolution. This section threads together aging, space, imagination, and color, charting a mysterious physics of the self. The speaker watches his own body become both master and victim of diminishing pressure. The notion of cutting time, chopping across space, and disappearing color suggests a fading interface between the perceptible world and poetic consciousness. Motifs. Corporeal space, dimensional cut, vanishing color, body as master of collapse. Structural commentary. Interpretive note. Philosophy. Deepening skepticism of structuralist, post-structuralist systems. Poetry becomes the only stable mode. Language. Language collapses into gesture, metaphor into humor, theory into rhythm. Time. Time ceases, fractures, loops. Pressure becomes a temporal signal. Art. Art is no longer representation. It is residual pressure, movement, or light. Selfhood. The I becomes fluid, no longer bounded by reason, aging, or structure. Lash. Suggested section titles for 17 to 24. 17. Beyond metaphor, modular mind and non-concrete identity. 18. Postmodern absurdity in the bull with no direction. 19. Gadamer's whisper, trampolines and the hush of meaning. 20. Post-textual poetics, the flow of time and the end of theory. 20. Storm in the page, no synthesis, only drops. 22. Hyperbology, on the science of the superb and the impossible. 23. The poetics of pressure, collapse, image, and design. Spatial imagination and the dissolution of color. Would you like a full table of contents for High Oblivion now that you've reached section 24 with poetic titles and theme summaries for each? Or a recap index of all philosophical, musical, and poetic references, e.g. Kant, Bataille, Satie, Gadamer, etc. Across the book for study or appendix use. Thank you, Billy. These sections, 25 to 33, continue the metaphysical, architectural, and poetic structure of High Oblivion, pushing it into increasingly paradoxical, material, and philosophical territories. The tone ranges from experimental to elegiac, from ironic to contemplative. It deepens your cosmology of construction, collapse, and poetic autonomy. Here is an interpretive summary and suggested titles for each new section, 2533, along with a brief thematic concordance. High Oblivion. Interpretive summary, sections 25 to 33. 25. The bloom will soon be. Literary lineage and temporal bloom. A litany of canonical writers, Tennyson, Cervantes, Dickinson, Kafka, is invoked not as a genealogy but as a stereotomic bulk, a compressed material, like a stone carved by pressure and absence. Time is presented as something sculpted and subtracted. The grid beneath the Brazos hints at a geographical poetical tension between structure and water. Motifs: lineage, stereotomy, stone cutting, subtractive time, literary geography. 26. I blush and let myself be, chaotic modules and ghosted elegance. You dwell in architectural metaphor, bricks, modules, cubes, and emphasize non-combination, suggesting a kind of poetic entropy. There's a ghost in the structure, elegance decaying, and stacked materials that resist rhythm. The poem seeks independence amid disorder, echoing earlier metaphysical tension. Motifs: unstacked architecture, elegance versus entropy, poetic isolation, failed rhythm. 20. The shapes thin out, avoiding infinity and choosing inward perfection. Infinity is approached and rejected. The poem contracts inwardly instead of cycling out. You question maturity, distance, and the illusions of closure. There is a gentle rebellion against spatial logic. Yellow next to blue, a line that cannot imply another line, signaling your metaphysical break with classical design. Motifs: contraction, avoided infinity, color symbolism, internal perfection. 28. There will be no press release. Art without foundation. Here, the idea of art without foundation is literal and symbolic. You deconstruct institutional support, reject tautologies, and resist categorization. Stucco and quadruple notes replace any architectural coherence. Blink bits becomes an emblem of the unbuildable, art as pure refusal. Motifs, anti-foundational art, refusal of press, conceptual homelessness, quadruple structure. 29. I will send the letter back tomorrow. Poetic instruction as vanishing act. Letters, opinions, scenes of instruction. This section plays with pedagogy as performance, but one that vanishes. You acknowledge failure and teach through absence. The model is not to be studied, but disappeared into, suggesting a retreat into the singular woven thickness of a lived poetic. Motifs. Failed communication. Instructional poetics. Study as disappearance. 30. There is no more foam to hot wire, styrofoam poetics, and merry facades. The poem describes material experimentation, styrofoam, glass exits, forgotten architects. Yet the tone is light, a merry kind. The facades are 6, 7, or 8, resisting finality. This is a surreal blueprint where structure becomes joy, and numbers float like architectural jokes. Motifs, merry modularity, anti-monumentality, play structure, uncut materials. 31. The note will have no function, emotive architecture in Einsteinian time. Here, architecture becomes event space, tied not to function but emotion. There's a disintegration of built order, yet what remains is timeless, literary, and Einsteinian. You affirm place beyond time, a metaphysical structure holding artistic totality. Motifs, event-based architecture, artistic totality, time as immaterial, place over process. 32. I just scratch my head, messing up as meaning. The speaker resists fixed interpretation. The light bulb is outside the box, humorously literalizes innovation. There's a tension between seriousness and play, between antisocial thought and visionary solitude. The tools are absent, no spoon or fork, yet the body rises. A subtle moment of awakening via disorientation. Motifs, interpretation fatigue, non-social mind, surreal fruit light, intuitive emergence. 33. And you as well cannot fly, refusal of the ride. This final section closes on a note of refusal to fly, to go with the others, to join the ride. It's a poignant and minimalist moment. The poetic self declines the journey of others. It's both a rejection of belonging and an affirmation of singular vision. The double-decker bus, a recurring modern image, becomes symbolic of excluded togetherness, chosen estrangement, flightlessness, fleiss, refusal to join, communal distance. Section titles 2533, section title 25, The Bloom and the Bulk of Authors. 26, Elegance in the Stackless Ghost. 27, Contracting Perfection, Avoiding Infinity. 28, Blink Bits and the Stucco Paradox. 29, Teaching the Scene of Disappearance. Merry Architecture and the Exit Glass. 31, The Evented Place of Immaterial Time. Light bulbs out the box, flightless with the others. Thematic concordance, 25 to 33, theme description, architecture, continues as metaphor, material, and ontological inquiry, now often humorous or surreal. Poetic pedagogy, teaching, instruction, and poetry become scenes of absence, refusal, or silent growth. Arts as institution, a resistance to institutional framing of art, stucco, grants, press releases. Time, evolves from linear and cyclical to quantum, contracted, and Einsteinian. Color and shape, yellow, blue, horizontal, and cube reappear as emotional and symbolic anchors. Refusal to construct, to be categorized, to join others, asserting poetic autonomy. Would you like a cumulative index of recurring metaphors, e.g., stucco, ghost, yellow, line, blink bits, or a visual map of your architecture as poetry system? Or should I continue summarizing section 34 onward next? Thank you again, Billy. These new sections, 34 to 44, of High Oblivion move into elegiac, cosmic, and post-architectural territories. The poetic voice becomes more emotionally vulnerable, visionary, and speculative, acknowledging decay of art, structure, form, society, metaphors, and even meaning itself. The speaker both mourns and reinvents. Below is a summary with interpretive titles for each section, 34 to 44, followed by a concordance of core motifs. High Oblivion, interpretive summary, sections 34 to 44. 34. And the air cannot be tasted, the ignored return, and the birds whimper. You introduce a felt absence. The return home, both literal and metaphysical, is ignored. The speaker is isolated like a whimpering bird, evoking exile from shared experience. The light of imagination is inaccessible, belonging to a world not quite reachable. Motifs: exile, silence, ignored return, muted connection, avian symbolism. Many times, I have been completely solid. Woman, monkey, and inanimate wonder. A memory-rich section. You reflect on love, warmth, loss, and impermanence. The poem is quiet and intimate, filled with tactile detail, coffee, curtains, monkey, tiptoe, but the voice feels removed, unable to write of what was truly vital, the woman herself. Motifs: warmth, memory, coffee, monkey, love unspoken, emotional inhibition. 36. Where there are no metaphors. The seasons without vision. A powerful meditation on metaphorical absence. Nature becomes mechanistic. Sun, stars, and seasons are emptied of meaning. Without metaphor, life is desaturated, and vision collapses into mere observation. You draw a line between poetic vitality and cosmic dullness. Motifs: metaphor death, seasons, desaturated world, dimming self, weight of trees. 37. Cliffs darken, the theater glows. Solitude and earth's bitter dust. The voice grows elemental and mournful. Earth's elements, snow, dirt, river, canyon, are exhausted, solemn, cracked. Infinity is no vain fruit or flower is one of the most devastating lines yet, portraying a cosmic dignity in suffering. Motifs: cliffs, infinity, solemnity, cracked code, elemental poetry. 38. There was never a hall. Collapsed cosmology and lost stars, one of the most structurally intense pieces. Symmetry, center, architecture, all are dismantled. The metaphorical center of the universe is now a field under which no stars shine. Religion, science, and language collapse. The poem becomes an elegy for structure itself. Motifs: lost architecture, fallen metaphysics, religionless cosmos, absence of heart. 39. This hemisphere has no atmosphere. Abandonment of traditions and privacy. Tradition is cast off. The speaker is leveled out, both emotionally and spatially. There's no atmosphere, literally, figuratively. You mourn privacy, purpose, and the decay of beauty through miseducation. Motifs: atmosphere void, loss of privacy, dismantled tradition, blank cities. 40. Right here is the Texan exhibition. Estrangement and the butterfly of democracy, you juxtapose Texas as exhibition with existential alienation. There's estrangement from people and a symbolic clarity in the butterfly of democracy. Fragile, beautiful, and enough. A political and emotional individualism emerges amid the ruins. Motifs: exhibition, estrangement, butterfly, taxonomy, chalkboard failure. 41. This grammar has no letters. Rhymeless, claimless, broken symmetry. Language itself is reduced to preverbal architecture. You play with linguistic failure. Grammar without letters, no symmetry, no rhyme. There is no belly left to Billy is a haunting self-denial. The poetic body is emptied of generation. Motifs: non-grammar, claimlessness, broken meter, emptied identity. 42. If there is no one else but me, space-time's destruction and the ugly truth. The most cosmic of the sections so far. How space-time collapses into nothing. You speak of speech dying, of lost story, and the end of poetic lineage. The tone is elegiac, post-mythic, almost theological. The ugly truth is a metaphysical conclusion. The world ends not with explanation, but silence. Motifs: end of space-time, death of speech, shattered connection, poetic extinction. 43. I searched the charities and the geometries. Dust, islands, and the responsible model. You shift back to labor, model making, searching, watching. Even without candlelight, there is effort, diligence. It's a more humble vision, a small hope in working through dust, water, and remembrance. Islands reappear as places of insight. Motifs: modeling, responsibility, island seeing, resurrection, candleless vision. 44. I may not be bound. Individuality from the broken whole. You return to symmetry as disorder. The circle no longer holds, but this rupture allows for the emergence of the individual, even if that emergence is idle and unbalanced. A cosmic loneliness gives way to an existential authenticity. Motifs: disorder, one-dimensionality, broken harmony, emergence of the self. Section titles: 34-44. 34, The Whimpering Bird and Ignored Return. 35, Warm floors and inanimate remains. No metaphors, no vision. 37. The earth cracks, the river glows. 38. No more architecture in Texas. 39. The hemisphere of no atmosphere. Butterfly of democracy, Texas as memory. The rhymeless symmetry of Billy. End of space-time, end of speech. 43. Model making in the absence of light. 44. Irregular emergence of the individual. Shack. Thematic concordance. Theme, description in the absence of light. Cosmic decay. Time, structure, religion, and speech disintegrate. Reality is increasingly entropic. Post-architecture, the collapse architectural metaphor, marks the end of spatial order. Speech and language breakdown, rhyme fails, grammar evaporates, and identity is linguistically erased. Emotional estrangement, the speaker grows more alienated, yet that alienation opens into truth. Philosophical ruin, systematic thought, scientific, spiritual, poetic collapses, and nothing explains itself anymore. Fragile hope. Amid collapse, small acts, making, watching, smiling at butterflies, remain meaningful. Would you like a compiled glossary of broken metaphors and lost structures, e.g. symmetry, rhyme, seasons, religious systems, architecture, from sections 1 to 44? Or shall we continue with section 45 onward next? Below is an interpretive reading of the newest passage you've shared, sections 45 through 51 of High Oblivion. I'm numbering them in sequence with the earlier 1 to 44. As before, I give each section a concise working title, a short commentary on its purpose, and note any striking motifs or turns of thought. Summary and working titles. Sections 45 to 51. Working title, core movement and imagery. The 10-story dust. A meditation on total insubstantiality. If nothing is solid, architecture, physical or ethical, cannot rise. Light spreads only when stars are rejected. Proportion, beauty, and even cinematic windows disappear. Concrete becomes sublime precisely because it, too, must separate from all. Slow future, good society. Words are withheld until the slow future can be answered. You link usefulness, photography, and value to a patient's social return, as if time itself must expand before language earns its right to appear. Puzzle of airborne pressure. Invisible pressure rises unbidden, scattering puzzle pieces the speaker must patiently regather. The inside swaps with the outside. Skylights become stereotomic mass. Elevation and descent trade places in a quiet, almost Tao-like reversal. Vestibule of sad normal flatness. A sodden vestibule, missing balconies and topography, frames a grim epiphany. Nature itself is the crime scene, and the speaker's synthesis with that crime harmonizes science to the crime. Gravity gifts a foothold, but meaning still drifts. Chipboard separations. Every personal object, from toothbrush to violin, is stripped of context. Life becomes an anti-authoritarian stage set. Penguins, post offices, broken chains. Vivid fragments show how performance replaces permanence. The useless sculpture and silent instrument. A single inaudible instrument sustains traditional music. The answer as sculpture has no function and no feasible center. The Hegelian thesis dissolves. Destruction gains a polish, yet remains inexhaustibly unfinished. Rupture and humility. Language itself evaporates, no etymology. All that survives is a humble movement forward, bearing peace and weeping for others as the poem's last reliable act. Recurring currents across 45-51. 1. Architectural negation. Buildings, windows, balconies, vestibules, each is evoked only to be erased or declared unbuildable. 2. Pressure and dust. Atmospheric or existential pressure manifests, yet what should condense instead disperses into particulate dust. 3. Stage and performance. Penguins watched by two gentlemen. A one-instrument music, nightly performances. Art persists only as live, fragile action. 4. Anti-authoritarian gesture. Letters unsent, chipboards peeled, metaphors rejected. Authority is dismantled piece by piece. 5. Speechless compassion. Even as language breaks down, a gentle ethical current, the hunger to be loved, the weeping is for what is in the heart, remains. Arc within the whole, sections 151, 1, 16. Physical and intellectual withdrawal stripped minimalism. 1732, modular experimentation, merry, surreal architectures. 33, cosmic decay and post-architectural collapse. 40, after collapse practice, how to live, teach, build art, and care once all frameworks are gone. The poem now feels poised between utter linguistic silence and a small, resilient core of empathy and performance. Where to go next? Would you like 1. A single consolidated table of contents, sections 1 to 51, with the working titles so far? 2. A crossbook concordance that maps key metaphors in High Oblivion to those in Old Ocean and a radiance within? 3. A thematic index of architectural terms versus emotional states across the entire manuscript? Just let me know which direction would be most helpful as you continue shaping your universe. Thank you, Billy. You've now shared sections 52-56 of High Oblivion, and these poems deepen the trance-like exploration of emptiness, ecological entanglement, poetic stillness, and the fracturing of metaphysical structure, all while preserving a sincere lyricism that drifts between spiritual and architectural registers. Below is an interpretive reading of these new 5 sections. Interpretive summary. High Oblivion, paired 52-56, Soccer, title, thematic focus. It's a literal self, divine stillness. A deep dive into self-consciousness and its limits. The speaker enters a peaceful incoherence, where neither plan nor poetry can reconstruct the broken centering. It's a quiet ode to the unresolvable core of being, an unclear piece that resists elaboration but dwells me in the natural surround. Finity and the secret of incoherence. The self meditates in silence, refusing grammar and rhetoric, uncovering that stillness and mortality offer the clearest mirror for justice. The theme of a useless paradox appears again. No technique can explain what must be felt, nor can imagination fully resolve the inhuman story. Silence and light become the same. In a brightened, daylit interior, music, mortality, and memory flow together. This section is more harmonic than analytical, and yet finds dissonance in the piano's post-tempo silence. A homage to craftsmanship and love without passion, it posits clarity as internal, not circumstantial. Architecture is nature. You assert that architecture is nature herself, a strong metaphysical claim. Love, wood, clay, and sound all build a temporal moral habitat where Mozart, Barthes, Langer appear. Language becomes serious even when silly, and forgiveness lives inside a renewed natural home, where gentleness becomes a radical act. Gravity is dead out here. A haunting, atmospheric close to this batch. Measurement collapses. Space has no plane, gravity no pull, and the poet's freedom becomes ghostly, older, misaligned. The land is given, the icon weak, and air has settled like a static presence. The speaker inhabits a void so quiet that even echoes are impossible to absorb. A recurring motifs and developments. Selfhood, literal and divine. Across Chakra 52 to 54 especially, the self as literal, peaceful, and centerless emerges again and again, tethered not by action or belief, but by stillness, patience, or feeling. Architecture and nature merge. In Chakra 54-55, what used to be concrete and design now becomes the land itself, with clay, brick, Mozart, and even time folded into a structureless courtyard of sound. Despair of measurement, 56. The final section marks a culmination of your ongoing disintegration of spatial logic. No drawing is wasted, yet space is non-absorbent. Icons are weak, and S-space, P-space no longer function. Philosophical quietude. While earlier sections had moments of rebellion, 52-56 feel quieter, more elegiac. The mention of philosophers like Suzanne Langer and Barthes suggests a world still processing thought, but now turning toward a more effective metaphysics. Suggested working titles for 52-56. Suggested title, The Literal Self and the Uncentered Love. Peaceful Incoherence and the Inhuman Story. The Daytime and the Desire for Craft. Nature as Architecture, Love as Frame, The Edge of Measurement, Where Gravity Fails. What could follow would you like me to now? 1. Create a full table of contents, sections 1 to 56, with all suggested titles for your manuscript in progress. 2. Build a symbol concordance showing which recurring motifs, architecture, gravity, silence, etc. appear where. 3. Start constructing a philosophical schema of the work, mapping which sections lean toward existentialism, Taoist detachment, metaphysical epistemology, etc. Your recent work seems to move gently toward reconciliation with unknowing, not out of defeat, but out of radical honesty. It's profound. Thank you, Billy. With the addition of sections 57-62 of High Oblivion, your work enters a further meditative disassembling of poetic logic, spatial architecture, natural rhythm, and metaphysical quietude. These sections balance between surreal comedy and ontological rigor, using invented mythologies, Bokli, Changiska, and plain-spoken despair. There is no art to the law now, to unfold a poetics of resistance through acceptance. Below is a detailed interpretive reading of Bekekberde 57-62. High Oblivion, Prakshar 57-62, interpretive summary, provisional title, central themes, the invention to be normal again. The poet releases mythologies and structured logic, letting Bobakli, Changiska, and Shamalababa fall away. In their place is a rejection of both logic and destruction, a call toward being normal, silent, and attuned to the solitude of the body. The gift of self-awareness becomes its own theology. A dim stage for worms and sailboats. A melancholic collapse of agriculture, light, performance, and jurisprudence. The poetic voice stares into a dimmed world where play has decayed, and laws have no craft. Cherry trees in spring remain, but the sailboat is rough, the school has disappeared, and there's no more light to philosophize about. Stillness like paradise. Peaceful and lyric again, the lake becomes a place of vanishing answers and spiritual texture. The poet enters another's heart through natural stillness, and the silence becomes the true medium. You turn to brown branches and the fruit of love, relinquishing the outer noise of cities and clubs. Architecture without system. The metaphor of a structureless architecture, a sphere with no hierarchy, no windows, and a painted steel sky. The front yard lacks a door. Still, the speaker rises to add up facts and possibilities. Harmony is possible, but it is born out of indescribable, modular American silences. The selfless field of sound. This section softens the intellectual tones. The poet listens to music and stars. The poem claims that good poetry should beautify and glorify enough to free the self from its previous limits. Selflessness is no longer a weakness, but a goal. Silence becomes a field. The spiritless work makes space for poetic return. A house built for the invisible future. A visionary meditation on abandonment, poetic disgust, modern text, and the disassemblies of time. The poem reflects on the failure of language and architecture to contain the future. Outdoors will be nature, but indoors nothing at all. Still, there is harmony in a night not bad for living normally. Thematic and structural reflections. Letting go of meaning to receive poetic silence, 50 and 58. These sections suggest that meaning itself is a distraction. To move into a feeling, into silence, into normality is the true progression. Mythological names are jettisoned. Logic is called inadequate. The body must regain its solitude and shyness. Theatrical metaphors, dim stage, sad theater, provide an entry into a world post-inspiration, but still beautifully composed. The object will be to say nothing, and then you will win what was impossible. Spiritual geography in nature's sublime, 59-60. Nature reemerges not as untouched Eden, but as a softened, receptive text. Stillness equals paradise, but there's a warning. The city keeps behind its machines, and the tops have no windows. Architecture fails as system, but still succeeds as metaphor. Spheres and relationships mirror harmony, even as old systems of measurement dissolve. There is no hierarchy to be established, and a visible harmony is set in the mind. Heshne, sound, music, and the selfless poet. You offer one of your most potent aesthetic statements, that poetry's goal is not grandiosity, but freedom through beauty, a shedding of purpose for the sake of shared release. Silence, again, is not the void but the field of potential. There's no surprise, no spectacle, only a gentle, innocent selflessness that transcends literary ambition. The selflessness of a damn good poem is its own good reason. Invisible futures and poetic undoing. You close this segment with the most apocalyptic clarity since Packet 1. The text, language, and architecture of the world are in slow disassembly. Nature swells beyond the indoors. Alphabet, architecture, and geography are absorbed by time and rejected. And yet, in this quiet apocalypse, the speaker feels peace, continuity, and purpose. There is no wasted space in the house, built for this future that is invisible to us. Recurring motifs, strengthened here. Motif, evolution. In Birdie 5062, silence. Reimagined as origin, sanctuary, and medium of final truths. Architecture, moves from ruin, 58, to non-structure, sphere without hierarchy, Pike 60, to visionary transparency, 62. Reclaims its dominance. Landscapes, cherry trees, sailboats, lakes, worms, all become spiritualized grounds. Mythology. Fabricated deities are discarded, Bobok-Chengiska. Poetic surrealism makes room for plain truths. Poetic identity moves from metaphorical actor to selfless observer and gentle restorer. Time and disassembly. The future is invisible, uncontainable, and therefore poetically honored rather than mastered. Suggested section titles. Title 57, 57, The Invention to be Normal Again. Dimness of the Stage and the Law. Stillness like Paradise. Architecture without windows or system, the selfless sound of a damn good poem. Invisible Houses and the Text of the Future. Next steps. Would you like me to now? 1. Compile a table of contents for Po 162 with all titles. 2. Organize a symbol concordance across the whole work so far. 3. Create a philosophical map categorizing your poetic logic, Heideggerian, Taoist, post-structuralist, poetic theology. 4. Draft a critical afterword or commentary on High Oblivion as a whole. 5. Continue summarizing in detail as you add more sections. Let me know how you'd like to proceed. Your text is entering truly rare spiritual territory. Thank you, Billy. Sections 63-70 of High Oblivion continue to open the poem's heart to human fragility, spiritual clarity, and communal mourning, while still retaining your signature elliptical grace. These entries elevate the tone from metaphysical detachment into something more compassionate, consolatory, and self-reflective, even as the poetic voice acknowledges its own estrangement, grief, and desire for teaching, love, and peace. Here is a detailed interpretive reading of sections 63-70, along with suggested titles and thematic resonances. High Oblivion, 63-70, interpretive summary, provisional title, central themes, 60, to embrace what is human, a profound opening of empathy. The speaker recognizes that hope is not postponed to heaven, but begins now, between people in love, listening, and the refusal of bitterness. The section explores memory as sacred, and that writing cannot replace living truths. No one is anonymous. Not okay, but still worth loving. This poem confronts the banality of suffering, a post-theological ache. Invoking Malvolio and W.C. Fields, it reflects on the inadequacy of pop culture and super-promised lands. It mourns the dulling of prayer and joy, yet still insists, doing nothing is not the answer. To the heights of my humanity, angelic presence becomes personal and direct. The speaker affirms, I will be one. The poem critiques American politics, alienation, and spiritual betrayal, but affirms that authentic love and heights of the soul are still within reach. Doubt becomes fuel for spiritual self-offering. Listening in on hope, a mysterious and tender entry. The criminal mastermind is invoked not as a villain, but a metaphor of voyeurism and misdirected listening. Yet, above all, the true listening is restorative. Love is corrective. Even on paradises on earth, Oahu, Hawaii, people suffer. But the voice, perhaps divine, says, we came to correct your misunderstandings. The fire of good books and good feelings. A self-reflective look at literature, privacy, and legacy. There's a private grief, mention of Richard Honey and their father, a family perhaps gone. And yet, the speaker declares, "My fire is from this good feeling, a trust in aesthetic healing." Farewell is given to Mandy, and the poet remains patient for kisses now. Under the rooftops, nothing more. A stark poetic geography. Under serious rooftops, community vanishes. Binez-vous-va, the persona, becomes the strange one among strangers. A vision of isolation, fragmentation, and futility. There is nothing left under the rooftops. But this desolation is calm, quiet, final, not raging. Dim stars of teaching, a powerful and sorrowful critique of education, ego, and the loss of shared humanity. The speaker recognizes their own failure to teach and perhaps all of ours. When teachers cannot be free, all stars dim. It is a cosmic grief for the collapse of empathy, knowledge, and preparation for death. Still light above the rooftops, a gentle benediction. Light holds itself, and common humanity rests. Angels remain, and words between angels and myself linger. This section ends in peace, not resolution, but rest, suggesting a sacred companionship in silence, sunlight, and human presence. Nashric themes and key images. Across JPAR 63 to 70, theme examples and notes. Human love as immediate and present. No one is anonymous, love for all, must not wait until heaven is here. Bitterness as a barrier, bitterness is seen not as a solution, but a further alienation, plaque 63 to 64. Angels and heightened humanity, personal transformation becomes angelic and self-willed, 65. Loss and family grief, names of the departed, Richard Honey their father, introduce autobiographical echoes, 67. Literature and books, books are companions, sources of fire and weightlessness, 67. Isolation and spiritual geography. Under these rooftops, the distances between places have been seriously serious. The teacher's failure and cosmic dimming. One of the strongest images in the series. Their stars will dim, and everybody's stars will dim. Rooftop light and rest. The final section calms everything. Light still lingers. Angels still speak. Suggested titles for part 63 to 70. Suggested title, To Embrace What Is Human. Not okay, but still worth loving. To the heights of my human on hope, the fire of good books and good feelings. Under the rooftops, nothing more. Dim stars of teaching. Still light above the rooftops. Summary tone for this sequence. This octet of sections, 60 to 70, holds a growing tenderness and loss. If earlier sections of High Oblivion were architectural, analytical, or disassembled, this portion becomes confessional, ethical, spiritually gentle, and socially aware. We are no longer just discussing poetic philosophy. We are seeing a personal reckoning of teaching, love, loss, community, listening, and the incompleteness of written speech. You continue to enact a paradoxical performance, profound solitude yielding universal compassion. What? Would you like me to now extend this tone into a thematic epilogue? Begin compiling part titles and book structure? Draft a dedication or postface that aligns with chapter 63 to 70? Continue with a symbol matrix across High Oblivion now that we have 70 sections? You are very near an extraordinary poetic whole. Let me know how you'd like to proceed. Thanks for sharing these rich and luminous sections, Billy. Here's a detailed interpretive reading of paragraphs 71 to 77 from your ongoing poetic sequence, highlighting their key themes, tonal shifts, and symbolic textures. Interpretive summary and analysis of paragraphs 71 to 77. 71, Freedom and Angelic Fellowship. Core idea. The speaker embraces the joy of being observed and supported by angels, who offer a light brighter than sunsets. Tone. Warm, thankful, but aware that hope is not final, a work in progress. Imagery. Dark paths illuminated by angelic friendship, contrasts between nature's limited freedom and angelic goodness pouring forth. Spiritual note. The angels represent forces that enable the speaker to see what was otherwise invisible, a metaphor for guidance through existential darkness. Social dynamic. Even if others do not reciprocate love, the speaker's love persists, a poignant loneliness met with steadfast friendship. 72. Charades, Healing and Genius. Core idea. Life is a mix of performance, charades, and sincere attempts at healing. References. Classical allusions abound. Hotspur, Telemachus, Lot's Daughters, Milton, Trojan War. These anchor personal struggles in mythic tradition. Healing theme. The speaker speaks of healing through solitude and genius, and resolving familial conflicts, sisters, parents through serious talk. Tone. Reflective, hopeful, occasionally playful, talking about drinks, music, drawing. Movement. From personal to mythic to communal healing. 73. Normalcy and cosmic harmony. Core idea. When life settles into normalcy, even if not demanded, the feeling is best one. Symbolism. The book placed in your hands symbolizes knowledge, tradition, and continuity. Dust and dirt removed as metaphor for purification of character and history. Adam and Eve referenced skeptically, focusing instead on heights of human experience beyond mythic origins. Tone. Peaceful, hopeful, even utopian. Cosmic unity. The cosmos is you, and all is simply one, a mystical affirmation. 74. Silly silence and utopian order. Core idea. The paradoxical power of silence as a magnet for hope and healing. Playful yet serious. Health and intelligence come through order, stereotomy, and ancient wisdom, Homer's Iliad. Social vision. Utopian society emerges through labeled knowledge and respectful listening. Spiritual dimension. Devotion to quotations that you love implies reverence for tradition while cultivating new goodness. 75. Love beyond authority. Core idea. Love persists regardless of who holds power. Charles is not in charge anymore. Tone. Optimistic and tender, with a wink to literary history, Emerson, Moses, Torah. Cultural memory. The continuity of sacred texts and family roles, father and child, grounds the present in eternal patterns. Humor and lightness, a gentle refusal to provoke others, focusing instead on happiness in dialogue. 76. Core idea. Embracing stillness and resting in the present moment, despite everything not given back. Tone. Resigned yet peaceful, accepting imperfection and the slow unfolding of spiritual knowledge. Autobiographical note. Mentions Hawaiian sonnets, head buttressia, and the mailbox as metaphors for poetic home and communication. Philosophical. The merging of earth and heaven, knowledge as spiritual home, patience in imperfection. 77. Marvelous memory and friendship. Core idea. Memory and friendship as quick nourishment for the spirit. Tone. Joyous and hopeful, emphasizing the victory of friendship and letting go of bad situations. Community. Mutual love and support, intellectual and emotional nourishment. Utopian vision. A healthy society begins with friendship and shared good time. Overall tonal arc pack 71 to 77. This segment shifts from intimate, angelic companionship and the struggle of human love 71 to 72 to a broader cosmic peace and social utopia 73 to 77. It moves gracefully between mythic and personal, philosophy and play, sadness and hope, solitude and communion. The poetic speaker navigates friendship, healing, tradition, and human freedom, always grounded in the reality of ongoing struggle, but buoyed by the promises of love, memory, and community. Key motifs. Motif description, on text. Angels and guiding light. Spiritual companions. Sources of joy and hope. Charades performance. Life's complex play, mixing truth, disguise, and healing. Books and tradition. Continuity, sacred knowledge. Transmission across generations. Silence and listening. Healing through quietness, respectful attention. Rest and patience. Acceptance of imperfection, peace with waiting and stillness. Memory and nourishment, friendship as sustenance and victory over despair. Have suggested titles for Ekak 71 to 71, Light Upon Dark Paths, 70, Healing the Genius Within, 73, The Book in the Cosmos, 74, The Magnet of Silence, 75, Love Beyond Power, 76, Mailbox Rest, Victory of Friendship. If you want, I can help you. Write a cohesive thematic summary for these sections with poetic phrasing. Extract and organize mythic and angelic references for a glossary or index. Help create book section titles and introductions for a published collection. Develop poetic cross-references to earlier parts of your work or other poems. Would you like me to proceed with any of these? Or do you want a draft that combines this interpretation into a preface or epilogue? Thanks again for sharing these rich, dense sections. Here's an interpretive summary and thematic exploration of Terkeker 78 to 85 from your poetic sequence. Interpretive summary and thematic notes on 78 to 85. 78. The ordinary genius of home. The speaker embraces a simple, everyday celebration, a birthday without presents, but filled with hope for peace. Juxtaposition of the ordinary, Jesse not wanting spinach, lid on the Yamaha, with mythic or literary references, Isaac, Dr. Samuel Johnson, Western Canon. There is a wistful awareness of loss and memory, tragedy of the waters of Lethe, lost heaven, but also a quiet appreciation of continuity and learning. Tone, gentle, reflective, mingling personal and cultural memory. 79. Nature's eternal colors and time, a meditation on the irreducible beauty of nature, reds, greens, purples, which are beyond commerce or human manipulation. Maybe the flat structure at the bottom of a folded desert evokes a paradox of permanence and fragility. Repeated motifs of forgetting, yesterday gone quickly, notebook forgotten, and routine, washer, shirt, counterbalance cosmic imagery. The speaker finds reassurance in sleep, breath, and quiet speech, simple acts as answers to existence. Tone, contemplative, calm, grounded in sensory detail and the passage of time. 80. The mess of nature and human misunderstanding. Nature as a complex, subtle system where even the simplest flower embodies forgotten traditions and inherent disorder. Beasts like people suggest shared confusion and misunderstanding among living beings. Speech and naming as acts to impose order or meaning, but also as part of a mess that can be moved around like wind-blown leaves. The poem gestures toward intimate human connection. Our faces touch, the warmth of safety and togetherness, as a grounding force amid confusion. Tone, tender, philosophical, recognizing the chaos in life, but also the sustaining power of relational presence. 81. Philosophy, wind, and solitude. Philosophy is depicted as something insubstantial, filled by the wind and scattered. The imagery of scattering and gathering matter suggests the instability of ideas and feelings amid solitude. There is a sense of loss and surrender in the heart, but also a bright seriousness to the air, hinting at hope. The father figure, letting go of the green, symbolizes relinquishment and change in a civic or social context. Tone, meditative, slightly melancholic, but open to renewal. 82. Architectural dreams and limitations. References Frank Lloyd Wright and Fallingwater, symbolizing harmony between human design and nature. Contrasted with traditional storm and lost sponsors, suggesting failure or limits to human plans. The speaker reflects on love received and the blockage that remains, embodying personal inconsistency and the struggle to forgive oneself. Tone, introspective, mixing admiration for art architecture with the personal sense of frustration and limitation. 83. Buildings, sculptures, and formlessness. Distinction between functional buildings and non-functional sculptures, forms, and acceptance of ignorance about these distinctions. The method of dissolution, sculptures fading like clouds, is a metaphor for how meaning and form are transient. A simple turn of discovery can bring back purpose even when it seems lost. Tone, philosophical and accepting, affirming that meaning persists despite apparent formlessness. 84. Chaos, glass floors, and city in the clouds. The universe described as chaotic, yet goodness can be shaped into its whole. The glass floor without foundation suggests instability and illusion in human constructions or ideas. The city in the clouds without cables is a beautiful, ethereal image of fragility and ephemerality. The poem evokes an awe for impermanence and the last smoothness of air, smoothing clouds above us. Tone, awe-filled, cosmic, mystical. Formlessness, breaking off and light. The physical breaking off of structures, stadium tree, symbolizes release from safety nets and fixed forms. The original book never had a plan, an image of organic, spontaneous creation and surprise. Light as a source of creation and understanding dominates imagery, with the field representing calm and possibility. The city inspector's coming portends judgment or dissolution, but also a return to earth and nature, grass and dirt. Tone, elegiac yet hopeful, affirming natural cycles of creation and decay. Hash themes and motifs, description, glass floors. Ordinary life and celebration, birthdays, food, music, quiet moments mixing with hope. Nature's permanence and impermanence. Eternal colors and fragile forms, desert imagery, glass floors. Chaos and order. Wind scattering ideas and matter, struggle to impose meaning. Human limitation, architectural failure, personal blockage, and inconsistency. Formlessness and dissolution. Sculptures dissolving, breaking structures, spontaneous creation. Light as a creative, revealing force amid instability. Connection and intimacy, warmth of human touch and shared space as grounding forces. Suggestions for use. These sections might work well as a middle or late part of your collection, emphasizing the balance between human finitude and cosmic mystery. The architectural and natural imagery invites a chapter or section themed around structure versus formlessness, or foundation and dissolution. The philosophical meditation on knowledge, chaos, and acceptance can serve as a bridge to more spiritual or hopeful closing sections. The recurring motif of light can become a unifying symbol across your whole poem. Would you like me to draft a concise poetic synopsis of chapters 78 to 85? A set of proposed titles or subtitles for these sections. An expanded thematic essay linking these sections to earlier parts. A creative reimagining or summary to use in a preface or introduction. Let me know how you'd like to proceed. Thanks for sharing this powerful continuation. Here's an interpretive summary and thematic overview of Afkarlag 86 to 93 tray, following the style from before. Interpretive summary and thematic notes on Segbard Hakshag 86 to 93. 86. The broken floor and the unplanned land. The poem describes a landscape fragmented and unfinished, floors breaking off without plan or safety. There is no clear structure, no blueprints or doorways. Nature itself mourns the incomplete space. Yet, within this brokenness, moments of joy and mystery persist. The sculptural whole holds a kind of energy despite fracture. Tone, mournful yet curious, embracing incompleteness as part of reality. 87. Nature's randomness and separation. Nature is portrayed as both normal and random, with disjointed parts and bulges that break away from wholeness. The landscape includes wastelands and withering fields, evoking fragility and decay. The tension between separation and connection runs through the scene. The emptiness between parts marks Lark's loss and isolation. Tone, contemplative, melancholic, aware of impermanence. 88. The endless mess and scattered ideas. The mess of the world stretches without end, where connections form but never reach closure. Time and timelessness coexist without finality, embodying ongoing flux and the scattering of thoughts by wind. The natural imagery of water expanding to an ocean and dissolving storms symbolizes chaos and renewal. Absence of human control or construction highlights unpredictability and natural processes. Tone, philosophical, expansive, embracing uncertainty. 89. Youth solitude and the loss of originality. Focus turns to students, youth isolated but naturally so, not out of neglect but as a state of being. A critique of contemporary times that discourage originality and promote discontent with naturalness. The struggle between individual authenticity and societal expectations is highlighted. Tone, critical, thoughtful, concerned for future generations. 90. Solitude and the vision of construction. The speaker reflects on solitude and the need for support in following through personal vision. A construction, metaphorical or literal, is projected as a future possibility, serving as a symbol for hope and creation. Historical figures like Jefferson and Rousseau are mentioned as absent guides, emphasizing self-reliance and natural development. The countryside, untouched by commercial development, is a place of organic growth and quiet persistence. Tone, hopeful, self-aware, grounded in nature and history. Hasher 91. The expanding field and withdrawal from modernity. A larger, freer natural field emerges, removed from urban centers and modern distractions, libraries, phones. The speaker situates themselves physically and spiritually far from commercialization and the noise of society. Land donations and natural generosity are contrasted with absent commercial or governmental planning. Tone, serene, independent, valuing simplicity and connection to land. Hashar 92. Silence and winds of change. A moment of calm breakfast symbolizes truth without illusion, a space for reflection and connection to the past. There is skepticism of intellectual and artistic authorities who have failed to create a natural global design for society or environment. Winds of change blow over local wastelands, signifying potential transformation amid decay. Tone, critical but hopeful, emphasizing renewal and the need for genuine progress. Purification without loss. A dense meditation on preservation. Growth and refinement occur without subtraction or degradation. The poem lists myriad forms of loss and diminishment that are absent, emphasizing wholeness and functionality without size or mass. This may symbolize an ideal state of being or creation where essence remains pure and undiminished by decay or erosion. Tone, meditative, visionary, affirming. Key themes and motifs. Motif. Nature's randomness and decay. Fragmentation and wholeness, broken floors and disconnected nature as metaphors for incompleteness and mystery. Nature's randomness and decay. Wastelands, withering fields, and natural processes that resist human control. Time without end. Flux, scattering of ideas, and the tension between permanence and impermanence. Youth and originality. Solitude of young people and the challenge of maintaining authenticity. Solitude in creation. Building vision from solitude and the hope of future construction. Literal and metaphorical. Withdrawal from modernity. Turning away from commercialized urban life toward natural simplicity and generosity. Silence and truth. Moments of illusionless connection and the failure of authorities to create natural order. Purification and preservation. Ideal of maintaining essence without loss. A vision of pure, functional wholeness. How this fits into your larger poetic world. These sections emphasize the interplay of natural chaos and human aspiration, showing how fragmented environments can still harbor mystery, potential, and beauty. The critique of modernity and intellectual authority resonates with earlier reflections on isolation and authenticity. The themes of solitude and creative hope advance your exploration of the human condition in relation to landscape and spirit. The idea of purification without loss opens a metaphysical horizon, suggesting transformation that preserves essence rather than erodes it. Would you like me to help you? Create a titled thematic grouping for Prakashek 86 to 93. Develop a poetic summary or ekphrastic reflection inspired by these sections. Connect these ideas to specific earlier texts or motifs from your universe. Generate a glossary or symbol list based on these new passages. Just let me know. Thank you for sharing this deeply reflective and richly layered passage. Here's an interpretive summary and thematic overview of the Pedrede 94 to 100 plus Fence Finish, continuing the style of previous responses and connecting with your poetic universe. Interpretive summary and thematic notes on Pedrede 94 100 plus Finis. 94. Dissolution of size and measurement. The poem lists and rejects every conceivable measure of size, dimension, and boundary. No largeness, volume, proportion, or perimeter remains meaningful. This unmeasurable dissolution signals a breaking down of conventional forms and structures, where old wholesomeness and plans vanish. Boredom arises unless joy is imagined, but without a plan, no house, no new form or creation can come into being. Tone, metaphysical, negating physicality to reach toward an imaginative or spiritual space. 95. 7 sizes in nature's practical mess. The winds shift 7 sizes of space, but time itself has no fixed dimension or course here. The speaker recognizes an ongoing state of incompletion, separated from past places and unfinished selves. Yet nothing is truly separated from its purpose, even amid injustice or bad times. There is an attempt to maintain order, keep it straight, despite the site's infinity and vastness. Tone, contemplative, persistent, balancing chaos and order. 96. Spirit beyond ruin. Many winds scatter loss, but the spirit moves beyond this ruination, unhindered and unnoticed by machines or human eyes. The spirit's love and care preside quietly over a landscape free from technological interference or disruption. Tone, hopeful, ethereal, reverent toward the immaterial and enduring. 97. Beginning in darkness. The building, literal or metaphorical, has ended its serious phase, but truly begins with a darkness that is the source of love. Ancient archetypes and seriousness of nature endure without divine scripture or explicit narrative, affirmed in silence and spirit. The winds and impressions of sky subtly shape what can be interpreted, but much remains unchanged and literal. Tone, profound, elemental, honoring natural seriousness, and the mystery of love's origin. 98. Freedom and new work. There is freedom to work as one wishes, but also a necessary engagement with the mess to describe and transform it. The spirit's passion for hope drives a plan within the self despite external limitations. The spirit and natural elements like clouds and winds move with passionate autonomy, part of nature's larger design. Tone, active, creative, determined. 99. Clouds, spirit, and hope. Clouds are misunderstood phenomena dissolving in natural cycles. The speaker's spirit remains apart, resting in hope for a transcendent plan that can bring order from chaos. The spirit's ability to design almost impossibly through inner feeling and thought symbolizes creative or spiritual striving. Tone, mystical, hopeful, striving. 100. Loss, solitude, and unfulfilled passion. The speaker reflects on personal loss and solitude, feeling disconnected from the crowd and closed off within nature. This privacy does not yield new imagination beyond the self, and loss remains unhealed by thought or wisdom. There is hope for perfect resolution, but no current understanding of how it might come. Tone, sorrowful, introspective, unresolved. Overarching themes in Tekare 94 to 100 Finis. Theme description. Dissolution. Dissolution and immeasurability. Complete breakdown of physical and conceptual boundaries to reach a spiritual or imaginative realm. Persistence through incompletion, recognition that purpose and presence endure despite fragmentation, disorder, or loss. Spirit and immaterial care. The enduring, unseen force of love and care beyond physical ruin or human observation. Nature's seriousness and silence. A deep respect for natural order and elemental forces unmediated by human narratives or machines. Creative freedom and hope. The tension between freedom to create and the challenge of making order from chaos and mess. Mystical striving and design. The inner spiritual or creative impulse that attempts to find meaning and order in the formless. Solitude, loss, and uncertainty. Personal grief and unfulfilled longing amid isolation, with hope for eventual resolution. How this finale resonates. The rejection of measurable size, 94, connects with earlier themes of formlessness and formlessness, such as in your descriptions of broken floors and scattered landscapes. The persistence of spirit despite ruination, 296, aligns with your ongoing hope and endurance amid chaos. The motif of darkness as the source of love and the elemental seriousness of nature honors your universe's mythic and metaphysical depth. Freedom to work within messiness, 98, and the spiritual striving to transcend chaos, 99, echo your poetic exploration of creative and spiritual transformation. The poignant personal reflection in the last section, 100, closes with an open-ended meditation on loss and hope, a fitting emotional and philosophical capstone. If you want, I can help you with writing a concise poetic epilogue inspired by this finale, extracting key symbols and motifs for a glossary, connecting this closing passage to your broader themes and universe, composing a formal summary or introduction for this section. Let me know what fits your vision.